is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of DeFi Decoded. I am Alex Tapscott here with Andrew Young. Andrew, we've talked a lot in the past about what are the main drivers of Web3 adoption. What have been sort of the key applications that have led to the first million, first 5 million, first 10 million users coming into the space? We've talked about DeFi and NFTs and stablecoins. One of the things that keeps coming up is the idea that gaming is going to be one of these great on-ramps. And it could also be this huge sink, right, in terms of value accrual, that people spend a lot of time in games. There's a lot of money already spent in virtual worlds. But by and large, those people don't really actually own those assets. They're kind of renters or borrowers. And if the game changes the rules, then they may lose the asset. They can't sell it. They can't take it with them, and so on and so forth. So the idea that, well, if you're going to buy an asset, you might as well own it has always been, to me, a very powerful kind of idea, a concept or driver of Web3 adoption. But there's a lot of Web3 technologies that are not always easy to use. And there are a lot of gaming developers who would rather sort of focus on developing games rather than getting preoccupied with tokenomics. And certainly, I think that's true for a lot of gamers. I've been surprised that in some instances, hardcore gamers have been kind of reluctant to embrace this blockchain-based model, even though it has obvious economic upside and potential other benefits, including different kinds of gameplay. And so I think the idea of making it simple and easy to use is a very key driver. And I think that perhaps gaming is one of those ideas whose time has come again, which makes this conversation that we're having today so great, because we have kind of the perfect guest to tell us a little bit about that. And that is repeat guest, Rebecca Liao, the CEO of Saga. Saga is a Web3 protocol for basically launching dedicated blockchains. It allows developers to create their own blockchains very easily and provides dedicated runtime environments for high performance and low predictable gas fees. Users can easily freely transfer assets between ecosystem using their dedicated chains, which are all IBC enabled. And that, of course, is Cosmos, which we've talked about on the show. And I think obviously this has got a lot of applicability in gaming for all the reasons that I kind of described. So Rebecca's going to tell us a little bit about Saga, how it's making it easier to launch and develop blockchains for games and also applications in other areas, and to maybe give us a bit of a preview for what's next for them and what she sees coming over the horizon. So Rebecca, great to see you again. It's been a year actually since we had you on the show, and we're looking forward to finding out what's happened and what's new with you. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex. It's great to see you again. You as well, Andrew. I had a ton of fun chatting with you guys last year, and I'm so glad that we have a chance to do this again. Like you said, Alex, a lot has happened in this space. If we chatted last January, which I think we did, then a whole deep of the bear will have happened. And I think we've seen actually a lot of great building during that time. Saga certainly spent a lot of time last year, really just hardening our product, making sure that our mainnet launch, which is imminent, will be successful and will give game developers, but really developers in general, a space in which they can spin up their own dedicated chains with the click of a button. And so we're super excited for what this period holds. Lots of product updates for you since we last spoke. And of course, we've leaned probably even harder into gaming and entertainment as our go-to-market use case. And I do have some thoughts on when gaming is really going to take off here, what's going to require, and why it hasn't taken off so far. So lots that we can chat about. Really great to see you guys again. And yeah, I'm eager to share it with your audience.
Well, I'm so excited. I think those are all great topics. And by the way, it should be noted for everyone who's listening, if this is the first time you've heard Rebecca on the show, Rebecca's someone who's been in the blockchain and Web3 world for quite some time. She's the CEO of SkuChain, which is a top blockchain company in trade and supply chain finance, which reached a 5 billion in annual volume under her leadership. She's also an advisor to the Sommelier Protocol. We've actually had the founder of that group on the show, Zaki Manian, before, and has also done a lot of work at Stanford Law, Science and Technology, where she is a fellow and has a background in law, writing, and advising presidential campaigns in the U.S., including for the Biden and Clinton administrations. So I just think it's sort of helpful to sort of level set that as people are listening to keep these things in mind. So 1 year in, I think, crypto years are like dog years, right? So it's been 7 years since you were on the show. So tell us, tell us a little bit about what's happened. You mentioned, the context for the last episode was pretty rough, right? It was 2 months after FTX collapsed, and I think people were openly kind of questioning whether or not to go on. And I remember the time being really refreshed and energized by our conversation. And I'd love to just find out like what's happened since then.
Yeah, absolutely. So our technical vision has not changed. We are a layer one to launch layer ones. So everyone who is building on Saga is by definition on their own dedicated chain or set of chains, which we call chainlets. So we ourselves are a Cosmos chain, and then everything that is spun up on Saga is also by default a Cosmos chain, although we have different realms, and I can get into that a little bit. But each one of these chainlets is a fully provisioned chain. It is a fully decentralized proof of stake chain. And all the chains speak to one another because we come built in with something called Cosmos IBC, which is inter-blockchain communication. It's a messaging protocol, very much like TCP/IP. And it allows all of our chains to transfer assets freely back and forth, but also to send messages back and forth. So what that has allowed our system to do is elastically scale. So a lot of developers, whether you're Web2 or Web3, you are very accustomed to the cloud deployment model. So when you build an application, you deploy to the cloud. And when you get a lot of user traffic, you stand up more instances or more servers on the cloud in order to absorb that traffic. In blockchain, there was no such concept of scaling. So what we did was we said, okay, you can stand up one chainlet to start with to house your application. But as you start to see more user traffic, then you can expand or scale onto multiple chainlets. And when you no longer need so many chainlets, let's say you just ran a tournament or you've just launched, but you're seeing user traffic start to die down, then you can kill the chains that you don't need and compress state down to the chains that you do need. So we can elastically scale, in other words. Is enormously helpful for the performance of any application out there, but especially for gaming and entertainment, where user experience is everything. So most gamers actually don't really like the concept of money to begin with. And honestly, why they come to a game, why they seek an entertainment experience is they want to escape from the real world. So if they have to think the whole time about, the in-game economy, or many of the other like fancy like GameFi financial engineering mechanisms that some of the projects have put out there, it's actually a huge turnoff. So what we seek to do is just to give the game developer the freedom to create the user experience that they think will be best for their gamers, and that starts with performance. So the system has held up remarkably well. We're in testnet right now. I think it's about 40 million transactions that we've processed. There are about 150 chains that are running simultaneously on Saga. These are all for all intents and purposes sovereign chains, but they are stood up automatically on Saga because that's the system that we've built. Second thing I'll mention is we have really refined our costless model. So there is a Saga token. Excuse me, but it only shows up on the back end. So it is used by developers to pay the validators to keep their chainlets alive, very much like how you would pay Amazon to keep your cloud instances alive. Same idea here. On the front end, by default, the Saga token is invisible. So we do not charge a gas token directly to the end user. Again, we want to give the developer freedom of monetization. They can have their own token. They can use the Saga token if they think it's good for branding and community building purposes. They can charge in fiat, they can charge nothing. It's a really powerful tool by which any application could really refine their business model, but I think especially for games and NFT projects. And then I'm going to double click real quick on the interoperable aspect of it. And this is going to touch upon some of the more cultural things that we discussed, but the reason why a game or gamers would want to get onto Web3 infra to begin with is really for freedom of expression. So the way that gaming is done now, people are much more active in their communities in the game. So they're not just playing the game, they're also actually like taking part in the social in the social community, they are modifying the game. So mods are a huge thing in gaming. Creators are also doing custom skins. They are really going wild with their digital avatars, and they want to own all of that. So you don't really have ownership if you're kept within a walled garden. So Saga's perspective has always been, if you originate assets here, or if you originated assets elsewhere, you should be able to move them between the different chains pretty freely. We're able to do that because of our architecture in a really fast way. So fast bridging between chains is something that's pretty unique to us. And all these different aspects are going to be a part of the Saga protocol that launches in, I don't know, like a few weeks. So it's a super exciting time. The ecosystem continues to grow. We're currently at 330 projects that are building on Saga. 80% is gaming, 10% NFTs, like art and music, digital collectibles, and then 10% in DeFi. All the ecosystems that we're airdropping to, Polygon, Avalanche, Celestia, Atom, of course, Cosmos, they continue to be huge tech partners for us. And then, of course, Solana as well with all their cross-chain games. So it's an exciting time to be here. It's a lot of work, but it's exciting.
No kidding. I mean, there's so many things to untangle there. So first of all, I love the idea of like the end user certainly not knowing about the fact that they're like doing crypto transactions, because
Right.
it's like, oh, I want to buy like an in-game asset. Oh, gas fees. Like, what on earth is that? I've never seen such a thing in my entire life, right? Like that's just the reality for so many people, and I think that would instantly turn them off. So the idea that like on the front end, it's a completely seamless experience is like table stakes for this, and I'm very glad to see that that's sort of part of the design parameters. I'd love to also just understand I understand the logic of dropping to 5 different ecosystems, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think that's I know that I've seen that before with 1 or 2, but I don't think I've seen 5.
Yeah.
You know, if you're the first to do that, it just seems like kind of ambitious.
Yeah, we probably are. We probably are. And it's so I would say that it's so a lot of projects, especially now because there are lots of airdrops happening, they have tried to use the airdrop as sort of a marketing tool, create awareness, right? So if you are a modular project, for instance, you might drop to all the major modular players, regardless of whether you've worked with them before and regardless of whether their community is already familiar with you. For us, on the other hand, we saw this really as a user acquisition exercise. So it would not have been possible if we did not start this journey earlier. So it was around January last year, actually, that we announced our partnership with Celestia to do automated decentralized rollups for them. We shortly followed that up with automated supernets at the time, now CDK chains for Polygon. And then after that, automated subnets for Avalanche. So you're seeing a theme with all of the major tech partnerships that we have, that at Saga, we are able to automatically spin up any sort of dedicated block space, regardless of what your tech stack is. So because we had been working with these ecosystems for the better part of a year already, the core teams were familiar with us. Obviously, the community was getting to know us as well. And so airdropping to them was really a thank you for believing in us and taking a chance with us early on in the life of Saga when we really had very little product and very little community. And secondly, to really build our rails. So I mean, people ask all the time, like, what is the Saga community exactly? How is it defined? And I think it's pretty solid at this point. I felt it a year ago, which is why I expressed it this way, and I feel it even more now. This is a place where the crazies come to dream their craziest dreams and feel loved and supported. That is found in any ecosystem that really has consumer applications that really broaden the freedom by which people can live their digital lives online. And so, yeah, it's because of the strength of the relationships and alignment and values that we decided to drop to all 5. But let me tell you, for the internal team, it is an exercise to keep this all organized, because there's nothing as vituperative, I would say, as someone who felt that they deserved an airdrop and didn't get one, or got an airdrop but they didn't think it was as big as they deserved. There could be a lot of like spicy people. So we've been careful about this, but we're thrilled with how the rollout has gone.
Vituperative. I think I remember that from the SAT.
Sorry, that word just came to mind. I was like, how do I describe? Yeah, I'm just gonna go with it. Like,
I love that. So Great. How many people are going to get an airdrop, do you think, roughly? Do you know how many wallets it is?
Um, okay, so I
Not
don't
to
remember.
drill down too much on this. I'm just trying to understand like the
Yeah.
quantum. It strikes me that, you know, um, for a platform that is trying to help to accelerate a
Mhm.
mainstream application set for
Yeah.
Web3, that the more the better, right?
Yes and no. So I would say that in many ways, Saga has, we are solidly crypto native. And so we understand the crypto space very well, but at the same time, a lot of us were trained in Web 2 or, some other field. And so we take the fundamentals of marketing with us. And you know that when it comes to your customer base, you have your whales, and then you have the broader community. But nevertheless, it's not about straight up numbers as it is about engagement. So we decided to balance that in our airdrop. So everything that I've mentioned so far with respect to the 5 ecosystems, you had to have a certain amount staked at like April 20th last year. I swear we did not choose a date for the memes, but it just happened to be that way. And if you increased your stake throughout the bear, so if by say October 20th of last year, you had increased your stake in any one of those assets, AVAX, Matic, Atom, or TIA, then you'll get an airdrop. So we were really rewarding for loyalty and people who understood what staking is in crypto, because we are a proof of stake chain, so people got a stake. And we felt that those were the people who are most committed to projects at any rate. So we wanted to target those users. But there is a whole other bucket of airdrops for our innovators. So the people who have been building on Saga since the very beginning. Those are the 330 projects that I mentioned. We also have been running a very active play to airdrop campaign. I think we originated that, actually. We invented that mechanism. It's very simple. You just play the games that are building on our chain, and the leaderboards are eligible for Saga airdrops. That's it. But we ran our first
Oh, yeah.
tournament.
That's so cool. I love that. Play to airdrop.
Play to airdrop.
P2AD.
Yeah, there you go. There you
There you
go.
go.
But yeah, I mean, what I love about it, and this is what gives me the most faith about Web3 gaming really taking off is, so we seeded it. We said, leaderboards will get Saga airdrops. That's what we can give to you is these tokens. But the games really got into it and they said, hey, we have tokens too. And we also have NFTs and we can do giveaways there. And so for some of the lucky players, they are getting double airdrops, in other words. And starting in the beginning of this year, we were running tournaments with our ecosystem partners. So Avalanche Games, Polygon Games, Solana Games. And sometimes those chains will start to really get into it as well and offer something in addition to that. Sometimes the guilds will offer something on top of it. Bryson, who is our main influencer partner and has been streaming all of these tournaments, he will offer some giveaways as well. And so some lucky gamers are getting triple, quadruple airdrops, but it's really over and above the value of the prizes that they're getting. It's really the fact that everyone is in the spirit of let's make the pot bigger. Let's do our part to just make this into like such a huge, like cannot miss, irresistible event. So that's been awesome to see. It's a long way of saying, Alex, that in our airdrop, if you were a loyal staker, then you will be richly rewarded. But if you participate in community building, there is also a huge bucket for that. And for anyone out there who's like, oh, if I miss Genesis and that's it, it's definitely not it. 6% will be airdropped at Genesis. An additional 4% will be airdropped between phases 2 through 6 of mainnet launch. Phase 6 of mainnet launch will be full feature functionality mainnet, and that'll happen probably the summertime. So lots more to come. If you continue to be loyal, I'll just drop this hint. If you continue to be loyal, then you will be richly rewarded in future airdrops. So yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting year.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of similar almost structure to kind of how Blur runs these like different seasons.
Yeah.
And they have kind of like the whole, the loyalty bonus as well as the sort of activity and liquidity bonus. I'm curious, what sort of broadly speaking, what's your current thoughts on the whole kind of like points meta that is really big on like crypto Twitter right now, where exactly like you said, you essentially like earn points,
Mhm.
and then there's like a gamified leaderboard, and then you may or may not get dropped an airdrop,
Mhm.
in sort of different phases. I'm just kind of curious, like, because I believe Blur sort of created that, and now it's really taken off, and then obviously with anything now there's like some pushback because people think, maybe there won't ever be an airdrop. It's just kind of like a tool to get people to do things. So I guess I'm kind of curious just on how you think about it, like how sort of points is taken over versus airdrops, and I guess the best way to sort of thread the needle between the two.
Yeah, so I would say that yes, points have definitely taken off. I'm really glad that there are some very talented application builders who are building out these points management systems. Because I think for a chain to do this from whole cloth is actually quite difficult. It is a true social app in and of itself. So really grateful to all those app developers for taking on the time and energy to do that in pretty quick fashion, actually. But you're absolutely right, Andrew. I am seeing that some of these community members are like, okay, you've asked me to like do all these things on behalf of the chain in order to be eligible for something. But what is that something? And when exactly am I going to get this reward? So I would say this is where this community management has always been a part of crypto, but I think this cycle is where it gets really serious. And people who do manage these communities, they have a huge task ahead of them, because so much of crypto, I would say, is in many ways anti-community. So when you start to really lean on just pure speculative fever for your asset, whether it's a token or an NFT or whatnot, what you're stripping away is actually this feeling of commonality. If the only time that your community shows up is on the way up, and then they sort of like, complain and cry together on the way down, and then eventually just all leave, you don't really have a community. And so how we have thought about it is, for any of these apps that purport to really help you build your community through a point system, that's great. Go ahead and liberally use those. Again, it's to create awareness for the brand, awareness for the project. People do learn something about it along the way. But you hope that once people arrive, there's something there for them. So whether it's games to play, whether it's DeFi apps to start earning some yield on, whether it's NFT projects that really resonate with people and they want to own these digital collectibles, there has to be something for the users to do. And there also has to be that really strong community spirit. Every community is slightly different. It is informed by a different set of values. It really follows the tenor of its leadership as well. But I think that the chains have to be really active in managing that. So what does it mean to be, a Saga community member, an AVAX community member, a Polygon community member, et cetera? What are sort of the tenets that you live by? How do you work with other ecosystems in this space? All of that will be super, super important. And it's not one of those things where like you have to be this like boring and tiresome politician who just like blares out these platitudes all the time. It really is a feeling that permeates throughout the entire community over time. It should happen organically. So I'm all for the point systems, with the caveat that that is not true community building. That like gets you maybe to step like out of 10 steps, maybe step like 2, and then you got to take it the rest of the way. But yeah, no, we're all for them.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so Rebecca, while we've got you, and since you're basically an expert in all this kind of stuff, one of the things that we've been trying to figure out on this show is a simple way to explain the concept of modularity to the average person.
Yeah.
So we have laid a little bit of groundwork in the past, just describing, there are different kinds of blockchain designs. Ethereum, like Bitcoin, is this network which is extremely large and secure and performs one function very well. So it allows you to move and store Bitcoin, and there's some interesting stuff happening on top, but generally it's that one thing. Ethereum is this world computer, kind of canonical internet of value, but on top you can run applications. And then you've got the internet of blockchains, like the IBC idea with Cosmos, where every application should have its own chain. And now I'm hearing about this modularity thing, especially in relationship to Celestia. And Celestia happens to be one of the 5 community ecosystems that you're airdropping to. So I'd love to get your take on Celestia and the community there, but also if you don't mind, like they're really pushing this concept of modularity.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, can you help us to define what that is? And if you can, relate it back to what Saga is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's a great question. I would say that Celestia is owed a great deal of credit for helping us think through how to basically reconceive blockchains. So Alex, you mentioned Bitcoin, you mentioned Ethereum. So a lot of these huge assets that we see on the leaderboard in crypto, they tend to be layer ones that are just one chain, so a monolithic chain. In other words, like typically modular pits itself against monolithic. So these are the big chains that are highly composable. So because you're all building on the same chain, it's easy for the applications to speak to one another, for the smart contracts to work across all the apps, for your community to stay together. That is the power that we've seen behind these monolithic L1s. The problem, however, is that they don't scale. With Ethereum, we've seen just high and variable gas fees, a lot of congestion issues. And even then, it's all of that is happening with the knowledge that a lot of these application builders, especially those who are building consumer apps, are actually throttling their traffic, or they're holding back on onboarding more users because they know that if they put on the full volume onto something like Ethereum, it would kill the chain, basically. The same goes for anything like Polygon, AVAX, which is why all these chains had to start to think about scaling. And for us at Saga, we think of scaling as opening up additional block space. You just need more block space. You are out of block space, therefore you need more block space. Pretty simple. And that's what we aim to do. I think with Celestia, they took it one step further, which is let's aim to modularize, or let's aim to disaggregate everything. So what Celestia itself does is data availability. There are 4 components to a blockchain: data availability, execution, consensus, and settlement. So they take care of the data availability piece. All the other projects within their ecosystem take care of the other pieces. Now, I think that what developers are finding right now is if I want something available today in order to deploy my application onto, it's very hard to go full modular because you have, first of all, a lot of decisions to make as to what are all the different pieces I'm going to bring together in order to form the base infrastructure for my application. And secondly, all these different things come with a cost. Most of these modular projects have their own token. And so now, instead of just dealing with one like annoying fee from Ethereum, let's say, you're dealing with 5 or 10 or 50 different annoying fees, and you have to figure out how to integrate all of these different components. So what Saga is doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to give you something out of the box. So since we last spoke, Alex, we have simplified our experience to a web app. Literally 5 seconds, fill in the parameters for your chain on our web app, and then through click of a button, you are automatically on your own fully decentralized proof of stake chain. Now, that is ready for you to deploy smart contracts onto. If you are a developer who wants to customize that further, then you can make it modular. Then you can start to swap out things. So if you want to swap out our data availability that's built in, for instance, for something like Celestia or Avail or any one of the alt-DA options out there, then you can. If you would like to swap out the indexer, if you want to swap out the RPC orchestration, et cetera, you can do that on any one of our chainlets. So we're starting with, okay, get the developer onto blockchain because they just need to get started. And if they want to customize further, they can. They can modularize their chainlet, in other words. But it's not a requirement. So I think the reason why Celestia had such a successful launch is they've been building for a long time. They've been building for 5 years, and the technology that they have is very clever, very, very clever. They've worked hard to build an ecosystem of projects around them so that you don't just have DA, you have all the other components of a chain. But for us, we are highly, highly focused on the app developer. That is our North Star. And whatever is going to make it easier for them to get started and to deploy a blockchain is going to be solid, scalable, costless, et cetera. That's our North Star. So we both attack modularity, but in slightly different ways.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, to me, it's like, keep it simple.
Yeah.
especially for the end user and even for the developer. Someone gave me this very like uncharitable view of modularity, which is basically like, imagine like you've got a blockchain and it's like a cheeseburger, right? And the cheeseburger, it's got bun and it's got meat and it's got toppings and it's got condiments and it's a whole package and it tastes good. Now imagine instead that I sell you just the patty, and then you got to
Yeah.
go across the street for the lettuce and the tomato and the pickle and the mustard and the mayo. But the good news is that the whole burger cost $5 before, but now the patty's going to cost 10. And it's like,
Yeah.
I, I didn't know enough about the topic to have a
Yeah.
view one way or the other. I just thought it was a hilarious kind of analogy, which like I'm sure there's
Yeah.
technical merit to it, but the idea of like the last, I don't know, sometimes I just feel like the last thing the Web3 world needs is like more complexity, right? At least for the end user.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what's the plan sort of in the next little while. Like since we last spoke, you mentioned all these things you've done on the development side. You've raised some money as well, $6.5 million as of November, bringing the total to 15 million. So you're well resourced, still pretty small raise, I think, by the standard of some other kinds of projects, but you've clearly done with that. So if we're having you on, Rebecca, in another year, and we'll do this January, February, I guess. What will you be telling us?
Well, by then we will have launched mainnet for almost the better part of a year. I think we will start to get into other verticals at that point, but really the heart and soul of Saga is gaming and entertainment right now. And I would like two things, actually, two main things. So one is this. I was talking to the head of gaming at Samsung. He's become a really good friend. Samsung's one of our investors as well. And talking through what does adoption look like? What does traction look like in Web3 gaming? And he said, for a top Web3 game, how many MAUs do you guys get? I was like 50,000. And he just looked at me like 50,000 in the wider world of gaming is a failure. That is a game that we would quietly shunt off of the Galaxy Play Store because obviously not performing. In fact, actually, if a game only gets 1 million MAUs within its first month, that is also considered like not good. The game has a lot of work to do in order to prove itself. More like 4 to 5 million is the range that we're looking at. And I was thinking to myself, I don't even know if Uniswap gets that in terms of MAUs. So it's a small community that we're playing in right now. It's a very small user base. And my goal is to make blockchain gaming, is to make Web3 gaming competitive with actual gaming. So we need to bring on millions of users for our titles. I do think we have some titles that are capable of that. The kinds of titles that we target are the titles that have incredibly passionate followings. I don't care about the scale of the game, the design of the game, the genre, how much money went into development. If you have a passionate community, that's where it all begins. So that's goal number one, make us competitive with actual like wider gaming and the metrics there. And the second thing that I'll mention is, okay, you get to mass adoption. So you have a lot of people like playing your games. You have a lot of people maybe using our DeFi apps as well. But this is kind of the work that you do, Alex, which is how do we make crypto resonate within the cultural zeitgeist? We like think about just how precarious a political situation always is for crypto. We think about the fact that a lot of mainstream media, a lot of mainstream society looks upon crypto with a lot of suspicion, lack of understanding, et cetera. We have, I think, one more cycle, this cycle, to change that. I think if we don't change that this cycle, then we might always be relegated to a very well-moneyed subculture. And I know that for a lot of people that's nirvana, that's great. That is their goal. I got to say it's not my goal. And I think for a lot of people who are early in the space and we're really hoping for that sort of revolution that this technology would bring about, it's not enough. We need to resonate with a greater cultural zeitgeist. So we've always felt that gaming and entertainment is a much better way to do that. Like broader gaming and entertainment is also undergoing a lot of changes. They're very open to innovation and expansion right now. So we're really hitting them at the right time. And I think we have a real shot. But Saga has been absolutely fastidious about making sure that our brand is something that can be a beacon for those who are crypto native and solidly in Web3, but can also really bring new inspiration to people who are not familiar with Web3, maybe don't even like it, but are nevertheless sort of in the broader world thinking through, okay, what's next exactly? I'm hearing too much about all these broader trends around like AI, the creator economy, self-expression, freedom, like how does it all come together? And I really hope that we give people a brand to look to that brings it all together. So yeah, it's a pretty important one. I can't believe that I blinked for a second there, but two main goals for this year. And when we check in again next year, I hope that we'll have gotten there.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been interesting to watch over the last sort of month is the explosion in usage for Farcaster, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've been following that, but it's kind of like it seems to me like kind of the first mainstream. I mean, it's not even, like you said, it's not even crazy big in the grand scheme of things, but I think it hit 100,000 DAUs this week, which for crypto is just like massive. But for social media, traditional social media companies, very small. I guess I'm kind of curious, like, what do you think? Not to like go too much into Farcaster, I guess, but like, what do you think the space is just finally ready for these types of like consumer crypto apps, just from like an infrastructure layer? Is there just a big enough kind of crypto native audience that you can now kind of build a big enough community there that you can then sort of get the scale to sort of cross the chasm a little bit? Like, I guess I'm just kind of curious, like, why do you think we're starting to see like the first kind of sprouts of these like consumer apps starting to take off?
Yeah, so I do think that the infrastructure is getting better. So things like Base, things like Arbitrum, for instance, have really helped with that. I think when Saga comes on board, I mean, it's $500 per chainlet per month, and with no other fees in the system, it is the most affordable way in which to develop in blockchain. But the cost structure and the performance level of the underlying infrastructure is really improving. So yes, I agree with that the technology is simply getting better. In terms of Farcaster itself, so it's interesting because every now and then these apps will flare up, whether it's Farcaster, whether it's Friendtech, whether it's Clubhouse. And the name of the game is retention. Can you retain these users? So for a game, for instance, day one, your big launch, your big open, that's a big number for all the platforms and the studios and the publishers to pay attention to. But day 30 is actually like that will give you a huge sense of the staying power of this particular game. And I think that's true for all of these consumer apps is, day one, big launch, that's great. Day 30, what does it look like? And the broader story there is retention. How do we retain people? And again, it is about community at the end of the day. Is there a way for you to enable people to really use technology to extend themselves, to extend their basic human instincts? Every powerful social app, every powerful consumer app has hit upon that particular objective. So with Farcaster, I mean, I've used it before. They probably are going to do some feature upgrades to make it even more seamless. I mean, I'm hopeful for sure. But I think that's the thing that you have to look for is how do you solve a very, very basic human instinctual need, whether that is for affirmation, whether that's for community and belonging, whether that is for like pure vanity, et cetera. You have to find that itch to scratch and continue doing that. Again, it's about retention. So we'll see. But yes, the infrastructure, I hope that this cycle is when it'll get to a place where you can have millions of daily active users, no problem, for your particular app. Yeah.
Well, I believe it. And I think you might be right. And I like that idea that we have one more cycle to get it right. I mean, not to say that we got it wrong in the other ones. I think sometimes the industry is too hard on itself. Like part of growing as an industry and a technology is false starts and failed projects and speculation and all the rest of it. Like that's been around. That's been true since the days of early capitalism. But I think it's definitely the time for the rubber to hit the road on a lot of these things. And so I'm certainly hopeful that Saga plays a leading role in helping to sort of support that next stage of growth. Rebecca, this has been a great discussion as per usual. We really appreciate it.
Alex, likewise.
who want to learn more or to just keep track of everything that you're up to, including the pending launch, airdrops, all the rest of it, where should they go?
Yeah, so our website is saga.xyz. All of our social accounts are on there. I would definitely encourage you to follow our official Twitter, obviously, because that's where all our news is coming from. So any news about future tournaments, any airdrop news, product launches, etc., they hit Twitter first. So the handle is just at Saga XYZ _. And yeah, I hope to hear from all of you. I mean, it's starting to be an incredibly vibrant community. We're building awareness among all the different ecosystems that we're airdropping to. They're coming onto Saga and just recognizing that this is a place where they can be themselves. So it's a very exciting year. Alex, I agree with you. I don't think that anyone did anything quote unquote wrong in the last few cycles. It just takes time. But I do think that for those of us sort of in leadership positions in crypto, it's important to remember, okay, the speculative fever is what fuels a lot of this. Without retail and their commitment to the space, none of us would be able to do what we do. But let's make sure that we drive this ship to something that can have real staying power and mainstream appeal. And I'm excited. I think it'll happen. But this is the cycle.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks again, Rebecca. That's it for this week's episode of DeFi Decoded. Great conversation. Yeah, thank you so much. We will see everybody next week. Got a lot of good guests teed up for the next little while. It's going to be a lot of fun this February and March. Until then, I'm Alex with Andrew. We will see you next time. Take care.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.